I want to talk about adding and subtracting real numbers, but before we go there, we need to talk about absolute value. Absolute value's definition is the distance away from zero. Now, if you look right here, this is saying what's the absolute value of 4. And if you look at the red arrow, the red dot, they've found 4 on the number line, and they've counted how many units to 0. They've kind of pretend you're standing on the number line. How many units would you have to walk to get to 0? 1, 2, 3, 4. It doesn't matter that you're going towards the negatives. You walked 4 steps. It's a positive number. Same thing with the absolute value of -3. How many units away from -3 is 0? Again, pretend you're standing on the number line. How many units would you have to walk to get to 0? It doesn't matter that you start in the negatives. As soon as you step, it's a positive number. You've taken that step, you've counted it. Count it positive. So it's 3 units. I also want to talk about opposites. Opposites are two numbers that are the same distance from 0 on a number line, but lay in opposite directions. So one is negative and one is positive. So for example here, what you see on the screen is, and we've already done this one, what is the, excuse my writing here, what is the absolute value of 4? How many units away from 0 is +4, and your answer is 4. And then they have the -4. What is the absolute value of -4? How many units away from 0 is -4? And the answer is 4. They're opposites. They're equal distance away from 0 because they are all 4 steps away. Now I just want to do a couple of quick examples. We'll start off easy. What's the absolute value of 8? How many units away from 0 would 8 be? And that's simply 8. All right, what about -12? What's the absolute value of -12? How many units away from 0 is it? It is 12. Fairly basic, fairly easy. Now, what can be confusing are the signs. Is our answer always going to be positive? No, not necessarily. What if I have the opposite of the absolute value of 9? Well, you need to consider the absolute value symbol. It's kind of like parentheses, so do that first. What's the absolute value of 9? Well, 9 units, but here's the deal. You've got this negative symbol out here. What's the opposite of that? Well, what's the opposite of positive? Oops, sorry, hang on a second. Right, what's the opposite of +9? -9. So let's try another one. What if I have the opposite of, let's say 23, absolute value of 23? Well, the absolute value of 23 is 23, but what's the opposite of +23? -23. So let's do another example. What if it was a negative absolute value? The absolute value of -7 is 7, and what is the opposite of 7? -7. So it's not necessarily always going to be a positive answer. You've got to watch what is written outside of the absolute value symbols. So absolute values do have to deal with adding and subtracting real numbers, but before we get there, I want to talk about double signs. Double signs are the enemy. Get rid of them. All right. So if you have something like 4 plus +2, your double signs are right here. Get rid of that. Adding a positive means to add. Just 1 second, this is taking a long time. So what that really means is simply 4 plus 2. Now, if you have something like 9 plus -3, again, those are double signs. When you add a negative, that means to subtract. That actually means 9 minus 3. Get rid of those double signs. It's going to make your life so much easier. So we've got more here. What if we have a subtracting a positive? That means to subtract 8 minus positive 3 also means minus 3. And we are going to look at this again tomorrow, you guys. But one thing I want to point out, this should make some sense, because think about this. What this is saying is, hey, what's the opposite of a positive? The opposite of a positive is a negative. That's where we're getting all this. That's where we're coming up with it. Same thing, 6 minus negative 1. When we subtract a negative, that means to add. What I just said, what does that really mean? When you have the opposite of a negative, think about it. What is the opposite of a negative? It actually means positive, 6 plus 1. So subtracting a negative means to add. I know you've probably been taught a lot of tricks and everything, but you've got to get rid of these double signs. I cannot stress that enough. So now what if we have same signs and we need to add or subtract these numbers? The rule is to add the numbers absolute value. And we will do some examples. When you add the numbers absolute value, the answer is always going to have the same sign as the add-ins. So if you're adding two positives, your answer is going to be positive. If you're adding two negatives, your answer is going to be negative. Your answer is going to have the same sign. So here are some examples. All right. So if we have 8 plus 3, those are same signs. I'm not worried about solving these, you guys. I just want to show you the same signs. This is a positive 8. How do you know it's a positive 8? Well, there's not a negative symbol in front of it. It's just a regular old 8. And this is a positive 3. How do you know it's a positive 3? You have to take the sign before the number. All right, those are both positives. They're the same signs. You would add them. All right, now look at this second one here. We've got minus a negative. 9 minus negative 2. Get rid of the double signs. What this actually means is 9 plus 2. 9 is positive, 2 is positive. You would add that. The answer would not be 7. Same thing, 14 is positive, 8 is positive. If you look at the next example, these are different signs. You've got a positive and you've got a negative. What this actually means is to subtract. That is actually a negative 4, and that is actually a negative 3. You're going to combine those. You're going to add those together. Negative 4 and negative 3. Add their absolute value. Again, you guys, we're going to do examples with this tomorrow. I'm not worried about the answer, but just so you know, it would be negative 7. 4 plus 3 is 7. Keep the same sign. Same thing. 11 is negative. 5 is negative. Add the absolute values. 11 plus 5 is going to give you 16. Keep that same sign. Here, our last example, subtracting a positive. This is actually subtraction. Same signs. They are both negatives. You would add those together. Now, when you have different signs, the rule is to subtract the number's absolute value. If they're different signs, find the difference between them. The answer is going to have the same sign as the add-in, as the number, with the greater absolute value. Whatever that bigger number is, they're going to be the bigger one. They're going to win the answer, win the symbol. So some examples here. First one, 10 minus 3. I know you're going, duh, 7. But I just want you to look at the signs so you can start to get this idea. That 10 is a positive. That 3 is a negative. You subtract them. All right, same thing below. That's a negative 4. That's a positive 6. Different signs, find the difference between them. You would subtract them. Subtract their absolute values. Again, I'm not going to do too much with this. We are going to do this tomorrow, but it would be 6 minus 4, which is going to give you 2. Now my question is, which one's the greater number? Ignore your signs. Just look at the absolute value. 6 is greater, all right? So that symbol is a positive, so my answer is actually going to be positive 2. It's a positive 5, negative 10. The signs are different, so subtract them. Alright, ignore the signs, just subtract them. 10 minus 5 is 5. Look at the numbers, which one's bigger, 5 or 10? 10 is bigger, so it's going to be a negative answer. Again, I don't want to do any more answers. We're going to be doing this all day tomorrow. Alright, the next one, you've got those double signs, get rid of them. When you subtract a negative, you are actually adding. It's a negative and a positive. Different signs, find the difference between them. You would subtract them. Again, same thing, double signs. This actually means 4 minus 1. I know you know what the answer is, but so you get this concept. That is positive, that is negative. You subtract them. Double signs again. It actually means 7 minus 5. I know you know what the answer is, but that's a positive, that's a negative. Subtract them. Alright? We are going to be working with this stuff a lot tomorrow.